not really anything for me. He didn't consider it a valuable thing. Isn't that amazing? The one who was destined to receive the birthright thought nothing of it. The one who wouldn't receive it is the only thing he wanted. He coveted that so much because he couldn't have it, and the one that had it could care less about it. It just wasn't a big thing to him. And so when he had the opportunity to have some of that wonderful smelling stew that his brother had cooked in exchange for the birthright, he's like, whatever. Sure, you can have it. You can have it. Now, was there in his mind at the time, sure, you can have it, but knowing that culture said he couldn't have it, would it really be that way at the end? We'll find out if he really thought that or not. But he says nonchalantly, sure, what good is it to me? You can have it. Jacob says, swear to me. Don't just say it. You swear to me that you're going to do it. Now remember, he was a heel catcher, right? And heel catcher, we determined, was translated as scoundrel, right? He was a scoundrel. He was a rascal, and he was taking advantage of his brother. He said, you swear to me right now. He was guilty of scheming and manipulating to gain something. Guess what? He was doing all that, and God already was going to give it to him. But he was doing all that to make it happen. So he went through all of this and schemed and planned and manipulated and did everything, and he put it all on Esau, who despised his birthright. And that despised his birthright doesn't mean that he hated it. It just means it wasn't important to him. It wasn't something that was important to him. He didn't care. It was a birthright. It was on him simply because he was the first one delivered. He didn't care about it. He said, whatever. At that moment, he really didn't care. And that's why he said, sure, you can have it. Just give me the food. So when we look at all of this, we understand that that's something he should have cared about. It's something he should have realized the importance of it. He should have understood what it really meant to have that birthright and to live that birthright. Many believers today despise their birthright. What does that mean? Believers, we don't have birthrights, preacher. We don't do that in our modern society. What are you talking about? Well, it's like this. If we are God's people, we're his children, then we receive a birthright in Jesus. We receive a birthright in Jesus. But here's the thing. In this birthright that we get is every spiritual blessing. It's a blessing of being chosen in Jesus. It's an adoption into God's family. It's redemption from our slavery to sin. It's true and total forgiveness. It's the revelation and knowledge of the mystery of God's will. It's an eternal inheritance and the guarantee of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. That's a lot. It's incredible to think about all those things that by becoming children of God, those are our birthright. Those are things that we have a birthright to when we become a child of God. But here's the problem. Many believers just take it nonchalant. They neglect it. They don't even think about it. They toss it away for, cheap entertainment or being popular or whatever. How many times does a young Christian in high school deny God because he wants to hang with the cool crowd? How many times do adults who know Jesus get in a room by themselves and turn on the pornography? How many people that call themselves Christians, instead of following in through their birthright, they turn around and go the way of the world just simply because it's fun at the time or it's what they thought was exciting at the time. It's no different than what Esau did. Esau said, I don't care, I'm hungry. Forget about it. We say, just this once. It ain't going to matter. Well, we're literally despising our birthright. We're literally turning away from what God has promised us and saying these things are better. These other things are better than all these things that God promised us. They're not. Esau despised his birthright. Esau's character was completely opposite of what it should be. And so we know that God chose Jacob for a reason. Esau's character was not the basis of God choosing. He chose Jacob before they were ever born. Jacob was the one that God was going to continue the birthright and continue the covenant through. Esau was not, and Esau lived that way. So that concludes our chapter 25, but we're going to move on over into chapter 26 and see where it goes from there, because there's more things that happen. So in chapter 26, we're going to begin with verses 1. We'll start in verse 1 of chapter 26. Now, it moves kind of quick. It went from chapter 25 to chapter 26. And it says, immediately then, there was a famine in the land. Besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham and Isaac, went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. So, there was a famine in the land when Abraham went down to Egypt, right? Abraham had gone down to Egypt during that time because there was a famine in the land. Why does everybody always go down to Egypt? Why do they go there? Do you know why they go to Egypt? Egypt is a fertile land. All of the water that comes in right there in Egypt makes it extremely fertile, and Egypt is able to continue and sustain through a famine because of the water that's coming in from the river and from the ocean and all of those things. And so they can do that. And so they were going down to Egypt. Isaac was, well, wait a minute. Let's think about this. There was a famine in the land, so Isaac, who'd been promised that this was his land as far as he could see. He'd been promised that he was going to be the father of many nations, right? He's continuing this covenant, that God is going to always take care of him. And he looks out at this famine and says, I guess God can't handle it. I need to go take care of it myself. So I'm going to run down here to Egypt, where I know they probably have some food, and we'll go down there and I'll take care of it. There was a famine in the land. He takes off heading for Egypt. Isaac lived in the land that God promised him, yet he decided he would go to Egypt because there was a famine. Now, Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. That name sounds familiar. Anybody know why that name sounds familiar? Abimelech? Well, Abimelech is exactly who Abraham went to, but it was a different Abimelech, because Abimelech's not a name, it's a title. And so Isaac went to Abimelech, king Abimelech, that's the title. He went to him just like Abraham did. Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar, and he began to go south towards Egypt, just like Abraham did in the famine. But here's the thing. Gerar was the same place where Isaac's father Abraham met the other Abimelech and almost compromised his wife when he told her, she's my sister. So the ruler of Gerar was called Abimelech, and that is his title. Well, let's see what happened when Isaac meets him, verses 2 through 5. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Where does he tell him? Dwell in this land, where he's at, in Gerar. And I will be with you and bless you, for to you and your descendants I give all these lands. And I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of the heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So God spoke to him. Remember, Abraham said, I want you to get Isaac a wife, but don't get her from outside this area. I want you to go and get her from my people. And they need to stay. We need to stay in this land. We don't need to leave here. We need to stay right here. God's given us this land. Isaac had been living that, but now he says, well, I'm going to go down to Egypt. And God said, no, don't do that. Don't leave out of this land. Don't leave out of this area. Don't go to Egypt. Some feel that Isaac met God in the appearance of a man, but he saw him literally as a man and had a conversation with him as a man, just as the Lord had appeared to Abraham. Maybe. We don't know. It's very possible that happened, that he appeared in human form just as he appeared to Abraham. Isaac's father understood the importance of remaining in Canaan, and he said, stay here. Don't leave. Then God spoke to Isaac, and he basically retold him the oath. He says, I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. You see, in theory, it was possible that the covenant could have ended with Abraham's passing, because he'd already done what he said he was going to do. It would have fulfilled itself, and he would have become the father of many nations. He could have ended the covenant right there, but he didn't. He swore it again to Isaac. He performed that same oath to him that he performed with Abraham. And so this covenant was not only for Abraham, but it was also for his chosen descendants. It was a fulfilled, specific promise to continue the covenant. And so that's what he was going to do. The formal repetition of the covenant included three essential aspects. All these lands. So it had land, nation. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And a blessing. In your seed, all nations of the earth shall be blessed. The nation was your descendants multiplied as the stars of heaven. So when we see this, all of these things that are there, God had those three aspects that he re-emphasized in this covenant to Isaac. This land we're talking about, all these lands around that you can see, in these lands, there'll be a nation and you'll be blessed. So he re-emphasized all that to him. But why? Because Isaac was such a great man. Well, wait, no, that wasn't it. Let's see. He said, because Abraham obeyed my voice. This is because of what your dad did. This is because of what your father did, the way he lived. And I made the covenant with him, and I promised him that I would include you in this covenant. And because of that, I'm reaffirming this covenant to you, for you to do just what he said, just what he did, obey my voice and keep my charge. He said, that's why I'm doing it, because Abraham did this. Now it's your turn. Now you need to do this. That's basically what he's telling him. Because of what Abraham did, you're getting the blessings from it. You need to continue doing it so that the blessings continue, that everything continues through this. So continue to do the same thing. Well, maybe he took it too close to heart. I don't know. Look at verse 6 and 7. He said, do what your father did. So Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked about his wife. He said, she is my sister. She is my sister. For he was afraid to say, she is my wife, because he thought, lest the men of the place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. Do what your father did. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean to sin like your father sinned, and he was even worse. At least when his father said, she's my sister, she was his half-sister. In this case, she's not his sister at all. It's a blatant lie. It's a straight-up lie. He says, she is my sister. He was afraid to say, she is my wife. So let's think about this. He stayed in the land like God told him to. He lived among the people like God told him to. But then when he lived among the people, when he saw all these things that were going on, he was, all was happening, he started to fear. They might kill me and take her because she's so beautiful. So I'm going to protect myself. And I'm going to tell them, she's my sister. Well, let me ask you this question. How does that protect Rebekah? It didn't protect her at all. In fact, that put her in harm's way. She could have easily been taken to be one of their wives because he said, she's my sister. So in trying to protect himself, he threw her under the bus. He just tossed her out in this whole thing. And he's like, I'm taking care of me. Yeah, she's my sister. Don't hurt me. She's not my wife. Don't look at it like that. She's my sister. I said that so the men in this place wouldn't kill me. It wasn't true at all. It wasn't only that it wasn't true, it might give him protection, but it put her in a terrible place. It made her more vulnerable, and it put her in greater danger, because even if it saved his life, she could have been taken. She could have been forced to be the wife of another man. All of these things could have happened, and all because he was trying to save his own skin. Now, the Bible doesn't say that we're bound by what some people call generational curses, right? We're not bound by that. But sometimes we find that the sins of the father are also found in the sin of the children, that they tend to follow the same thing and make the same mistakes. And this was very true in Isaac's case. He was following along exactly what his father had done. Look at verse 8. Verse 8 says this. Now it came to pass when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked through a window and saw, and there was Isaac, showing endearment to Rebekah, his wife. Oh, that's a problem. That's a problem. When he had been there a long time, he'd been there for a very long time, an extended period of time, and Rebekah had not been taken, right? So, hey, maybe that's not going to happen. Been there for a long time. And so this is one of the ways that God had protected Isaac, because he didn't let them take Rebekah, even though they could have, the way that he did it. Isaac began to depend more on his ability than God. He began to depend on his ability instead of God because of everything that had happened. So then there was Isaac, showing endearment to Rebekah. But does anybody have a King James Version tonight? What does the King James Version say?
Verse 7?
Yeah, verse 8.
And it came to pass when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife.
He was sporting with Rebekah his wife.
It says caressing.
Yours says what?
Caressing.
Caressing. So we got caressing, we got enduring, and we got sporting.
Sporting. That's an interesting way to put it.
Basically, all those mean he was with her in a way that was appropriate to be with your wife, but not your sister. Right? And so Abimelech looked out and went, yeah, that's not his sister. That's not his sister. He was caught. The King James, I love that, sporting with his wife. That's an interesting way of putting it. He was caressing, he was enduring, he was sporting, he was with his wife, and it was obvious it was his wife and not his sister. 9 through 11, that's probably going to be about where we'll have to end tonight, but we'll see. 9 through 11, and it says this. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, quite obviously, she is your wife. So how could you say she is my sister? Isaac said to him, because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might soon have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. So we look at all of this, and the same thing happened with his father, right? Same thing happened. This pagan king calls him in and has more of a understanding about what could happen than even this man that's supposed to be living through the covenant of God. He says, if we laid with your wife, all that guilt would have been brought on us. What would you have done? When Abraham did it, he said, we could have been struck down, right? All this that you did, why did you do that to us? And so here he is doing the same thing, but the pagan king realizes even more than he does how wrong it is that he did it. He said, quite obviously, she's not your wife. She is your wife. He thought he could hide it, but after it had been a while, he got so comfortable that he didn't hide it anymore. And so that PDA did him in, right? That public display of affection did him in. He got caught. He got seen doing what he shouldn't have been doing if it was his sister. And so obviously it happened. The same thing happens with any lie, right? Eventually we get caught. What is it that you have done to us? Exactly how Pharaoh said to Abraham, wasn't Abimelech, it was Pharaoh, said to him, what is it that you have done? You have made this deception. This could be a problem for us. This would be something that is a problem for us. We've taken you in. We've allowed you to be here. We've given you everything you needed. We've done all of these things. And how do you repay that? You put us in a position where we might have an adulterous affair with your wife unknowingly because we thought she was a single woman and we want to take her as our wife. You put us in that position because of your lies. You know, God's people do some crazy things. Even today, God's people do some crazy things. We seem to be afraid sometimes to tell it like it is. And by doing that, we fail to share the gospel with someone because, well, they might not like us if we tell them the truth. They might not like us if we tell them. I could tell them that I'm a Christian, but a couple things. First of all, if I tell them I'm a Christian, then they might not want to be my friend anymore because they're not. And then the other thing is, if I tell them I'm a Christian, but I've been sitting out here behind the stadium, on the pickup truck drinking beer on Friday night with them, then they'll go, well, if you're a Christian, why are you doing these things? So then I'm going to be judged for doing what I've been doing when they find out I'm a Christian. So it'd just be better if I kept my mouth shut and I didn't tell them anything. If I just let them think whatever they want to think, I know that I'm a Christian and I know I'm not doing the right things, but, God will forgive me. But I don't want them to know. I don't want to tell them. I don't want them to dislike me, or I don't want them to judge me or whatever. So I'm not going to tell them. Well, of course, that doesn't hurt anything that you didn't tell them, right? It doesn't hurt a thing. Wait, or does it? So most of you have heard, I've played it many times within our church. It's a fictional story that's called Letters from Hell. And it's a letter from hell that this person who supposedly was in a terrible car accident, a young man, and died and was sent to hell. And it's talking about as he's realizing his revelation of being in hell and the horrors that he's beginning to see and all the things that are happening, he's asking his friend, who he knows was a Christian, why didn't you ever tell me? Because now he knows, he can see clearly that this was a Christian. Why didn't you ever tell me? 3 times on the day that I died, before I died, it was brought up and you shrugged it off. You outright denied it. You said you weren't. You never told me anything about this. All the time that I've been with you, and you lied about being a Christian. You never told me that you were. You never shared anything with me. Did you hate me that much that you couldn't tell me about it? I can hear the demons right now. I can smell the sulfur. My skin is on fire. I'm in extreme pain. The gnashing of teeth is getting louder and louder, and he's beginning to scream as he says this. The fear and the heart in his voice gets more and more and more, until the point that, it's a fever pitch, that it's so horrible, and then everything goes dead silent. And he says, I wish you were here. Now, Abraham didn't tell the king that she was his wife. Isaac didn't tell the king that she was his wife. By not doing that, he could have put any of them in danger if they had taken her as a wife. That wouldn't be near the danger that we're talking about with us today. Here we are, and instead of just being open about our Christianity, letting people know who we are and whose we are, we hide it, we lie about it, we just don't tell anybody. We do all of those things to protect our ego or our supposed friendship or our reputation or whatever it might be. And all we do when we do that is literally, if the people we're doing that with are lost, we're helping to condemn them to hell. That's what we're doing. Well, whoa, preacher, that's kind of hard now. I mean, that's really harsh to say something like that. And too many times we don't talk about that. And we don't talk about that, it becomes easier not to think about that. And if we're not thinking about that, then what are we doing? We're absolutely not doing what we're supposed to do. Isaac knew what he was supposed to do. He knew how he was supposed to do things, but he didn't do it. And it could have been a very dangerous situation. For us, if we don't do that, what if no one else ever tells them? What if no one else ever tells them? In the situation for this letter I was talking about, this was his best friend. He was hanging with his best friend who was a Christian but wouldn't talk to him about Jesus. Well, I'll tell him later when the time's right. Maybe I'll invite him to church one day. You know, after we finish this up and whatever, I'll do better, and then I'll tell him, because I don't want him judging me right now. Later on, maybe down the road, I will tell him. But he died that night. We're not guaranteed another moment. What if you're the last person that anyone ever talked to and you didn't tell them? There's no opportunity for a do-over. We've got to understand those things as they happen. What have you done to us? You have put us in a terrible situation. So then Abimelech does something better than Isaac. Abimelech comes back and says, hey, none of y'all better touch her or him. Don't touch either one of them. They are to be left alone. You leave them, you let them be, you don't bother them. And they stayed and they dwelled in that place. And we'll find out later that not only did they stay and they dwelled in that place, but they became very wealthy. Seems like I heard that story too. They became very wealthy. So we'll talk about that when we get together again next week. But I want us to leave thinking about this. Thinking about this. If we have opportunities to share the gospel of Christ with someone, and instead we don't because we're worried about how someone will think about us, we're worried about whether we'll lose a friend. Maybe we know that, you know, this is a cousin or a brother or a father, and you know, if I say that, then that's going to really mess up our Christmas gatherings. That's going to mess up our family get-togethers. That's going to be a rough time, and I don't want to be the one that does that. Maybe I just keep my mouth shut and pray that God would send somebody to tell them. I'm not going to say anything, but I'm going to pray, God, would you please send somebody to tell them? Sometimes I wish God would speak directly in an audible voice and say, I sent you. You're praying for me to send someone to tell them. I put you right there. You're the person that knows them better than anybody, and I put you right there to tell them, and you won't do it. Why are you bothering me? Why are you wasting your time praying for this when I sent you? Why aren't you just doing it? But we're so afraid that, well, they might not like me anymore. They might cast me out of the family. They might whatever. Can I just say this? I'm sorry. Would it be better to not be able to attend family gatherings, but meet them one day in heaven? Or would it be better to keep going to all the family gatherings and one day look down and see them in hell? This life is very short, but heaven and hell are eternal for all eternity. We let our fragile feelings, egos, whatever, dictate the things that we do because we don't want to be disliked or kicked out of the family or whatever. Or maybe, you know, depending on who we're talking to, we don't want to be beat up, whatever. You know, maybe there's going to be something even worse. And so instead we just don't say. But if you pause for a moment and just let yourself wonder, what if when I walk away, a stray bullet takes them out? What if when I walk away, somebody's car flies off the road and takes them out? What if when I walk away, they have a massive heart attack and die? And there's never another opportunity for them to know. And I could have told them. Then there's the thought of, I've tried to tell them my whole life, and they've never responded. How do you know this time isn't going to be the time? Because it's in God's time, not ours. How do you know this time isn't going to be the time? It might be. At least if I tried to tell them and I walked away and something happened, I can know that I did everything I could in my power to share the gospel with them. And I won't feel that, I won't have that guilt in my life or that wonder, could I have maybe saved them? I tried everything I could. You'd be surprised how many times when we struggle with it and fight with it and continue over and over and over, if we finally give in and let God, we see amazing things happen. I shared with you before, a member of this church asked me to please go see his uncle, who had been a merchant marine all his life, and he was in his, I think his late 80s, and he was in a nursing home, and they knew he probably didn't have a whole lot of time left. And they said, we've tried to talk to him our whole life, but he's never listened to us. Would you just go and talk to him? Well, they could have just said, well, we tried and never done anything, but it was on their heart enough that they said, maybe if somebody else goes, maybe he'll listen. Maybe he'll listen. I don't have anything extra special to say. I say the same thing that you do when you talk to someone about Jesus. I went into the nursing home. I spoke to the man. We had a few pleasantries. He told me that he was a merchant marine. I asked him this one question. I said, well, all the time that you lived your life out on the seas and the things that you saw, did you ever see anything that made you believe there was a God? He said, absolutely. I said, okay. So if you believe that there's a God, because you saw all these things and you know that there's a God, I said, do you know that that same God wants to give you salvation? I heard that. I said, do you think you're a sinner? He said, the worst. I said, do you think those sins can be forgiven? And he said, yeah, they probably could be. And I said, let me tell you how they can be. And I told him, I said, do you think that's something that you would like to do right now, knowing that you may or may not have very much time left? He said, I believe I do. And he prayed and received Christ right then, and less than a week later, he was dead. The family had the peace at his funeral to know that he had given his life to Christ. They had tried all their life to do that, and he never received it, never. Would get angry about it, tell him he won't talk about it anymore. One more time, they tried, and that was the time. What if that one more time means you have to be the one to talk to him? What if that one more time God said, you go do it? You talk to him. This might be the time. If you don't try, you'll never know. But we have to stop being worried about everything else and keeping our self-preservation while putting others in danger, which is exactly what Isaac did. Listen, take that tonight, think about that, pray about that, and let God use you to speak to someone about Jesus. I pray that you have a very blessed week. If you joined us online, God bless and good night.